Hey, this is Joe Gilder from Home Studio Corner. I love checklists. I use them for everything from creating YouTube videos to planning out weekly services at my church and a lot more. Even though I've made thousands of videos since starting in 2009, I still sometimes forget some of the steps. Checklists help prevent that. Today I've got a 3-part checklist for you to use every time you export a mixdown. It'll help you avoid 3 common mistakes I see all the time from people. Let's dive in. Number 1, clear start and end points. I see this all the time. Folks will send a mix in and I'll hit play and it'll be 5 to 10 seconds of silence before the music begins. It's not the end of the world, but it's just annoying, especially if I'm expecting to hear music. What if I listen for 4 seconds and then stop because I think it's silence the entire time? Then I don't even listen to your music. Now we've got to go back and forth and you realize, oh, I rendered it with too much of an intro. I can fix that. Just fix it on the front end before you ever export it. Little things like this can cause people to start to get annoyed or to maybe doubt that you know what you're doing. This is an easy way to just avoid that altogether. Same thing on the back end of the song. If you don't set the end point appropriately, maybe the final chord hits and then it cuts off because you didn't actually extend it as far as it needs to go. Here's what that looks like in Studio One. Your system might be different. Here's a song that I'm mixing, and you can see my template has this end point here at 5 minutes. Well, the song ends here, so I don't want another minute and a half or minute and 10 seconds of a gap at the end, so I can bring the end point in here where the guitars fade out and then the song ends. Here at the beginning, we can see there's some talking here. The music actually doesn't start until about right here, I believe. So I need to move this start marker, so when I go to export and I choose the export range between song start and end marker, now it's correct. Now, if you're using a different system, I know when I use Pro Tools, I would usually set like the loop points, and that was my export range. However you do it, it's simple to do. Just make sure that's a part of your process so you don't end up sending stuff with huge blank intros or cut off outros. Number 2, limiter on the master. When exporting for yourself or for a friend or even a client, it's a good idea to put a limiter on your main output and increase the volume by anywhere from 6 to 10 decibels. Why would you want to do this? Because a couple of things happen if you send someone a mix that's really quiet. They may not be able to hear everything. Maybe they listen in their car and it's so quiet they can't really hear what's happening. It starts to create a uneasiness in them. Like, if this is way quieter than everything else I listen to, maybe this person doesn't know what they're doing. Even if you explain to them, hey, this is quiet because it's not mastered, it will eventually get mastered and be nice and loud, it's an uphill battle. You might as well throw a limiter on there and push up the volume into the limiter until it's just kissing the peaks. It's not doing a ton of limiting, but it's more in the ballpark of the volume they're used to hearing from their music. And then they can listen to your mix instead of listening to the fact that your mix is too quiet. It also gives you an idea of what's going to happen when your mix is properly mastered. You can hear how's that limiter interacting with things and maybe make adjustments to the mix accordingly. Also, when you're comparing your mix to some of your favorite albums, it's nice if it's in the same ballpark volume-wise. Here's how that looks for me. I take a limiter and put it on the post section here on my master fader. In this instance, it's the FabFilter Pro L2. And I just turn it up by 6 decibels. That's my default setting. Typically, the way I mix, I need about 6 dB before any clipping happens. And so if I were to hit play on this and just take a look, now we can see this mix is actually pretty quiet. There we go. In the louder sections, it's getting up. It hasn't quite hit the limiter, so I might push it up a little bit more until I see just the littlest bit of peaks here. So now I have a nice loud mix to send to the client. I'm not talking about crushing it with the limiter. Don't push it up until the limiter's going nuts. Just let the limiter kiss the mix, and that'll get the volume up plenty loud enough to make everybody happy. Number 3, correct export settings. This has been a more recent phenomenon where I see people exporting their mixdowns at the wrong format, at the wrong resolution, and they don't even realize that they're basically ruining the mix in the export stage, which is just tragic. So MP3, it's a smaller file format. So if I want to send a bunch of mixes to a client, maybe text it to them. A WAV file, which is a full resolution piece of audio, might be 50 megabytes. Maybe that's too big to send over text or email, but maybe something that's like 5 to 10 megabytes might be fine. That's where MP3s can come in. Now, MP3s got a bad rap when they first came out because they sounded pretty bad, but today they sound great. The higher resolution MP3s, you'd be hard pressed to hear much of a difference between that and a high resolution WAV file, especially in normal like earbud listening environments. So if you're going to export MP3s, I say great, but make sure you don't make this mistake. Okay, so here's the export window, and here's the section where I choose what kind of format I want to export. I typically deal only in WAV files and MP3s. If I click MP3, you can see this setting right here, the bit rate, is super important. Right now it's set to 64 kilobits per second. 320 is what I recommend. I'll do 128 for spoken word podcasts and sermons if I need to keep the file size down because of upload limits on different podcast platforms. Spoken word sounds fine at 128, but a stereo file at 64 sounds terrible versus a 320. Don't believe me? Let's take a listen. First up, here's an MP3 at 320. And here's that same song at 64. Ain't nothing good about that. The high frequencies have that gerbil, chirpy sound that you hear in like low quality like videos and things like that. The low end is wonky. The stereo width is messed up. It has no detail. It's just terrible. Now imagine you work on a beautiful mix. You go to export it and you go and listen in your car or on your headphones and you think, oh man, it sounds terrible. When it turns out it wasn't your mix that was terrible, you just exported at the wrong setting. I know it seems, if you've never done this before, it seems silly, but I've heard it just in the last year multiple times where people send a mix and the first thing I hear is something like this. And immediately I say, well, this is a low quality. Like literally, it is a smaller file size. They have to just completely wreck the audio to get that down to such a small file size. So every time you export, I would just say, do not go below 320, and your life will be better. Okay, that's it. Write these down on a sticky note, stick it on your monitor, so you see it every time you're working on music. Your mixes will thank you. Also, if you'd like to get a free mixing guide from me, I've got something called the 5-Step Mix Guide. It's absolutely free. You can have one. Check it out at 5stepmix.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.